If you've spent years avoiding ice cream because of your diabetes, I owe you an apology on behalf of my profession. A clinical trial published in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2024, conducted at the Dasman Diabetes Institute on type 2 diabetic patients, confirmed something most doctors still don't tell you. The ice cream you've been afraid to touch has a glycemic index of 37. Whole wheat bread is 74. White rice is 72. The dessert you gave up the day you were diagnosed raises your blood sugar more slowly than the toast you ate this morning. But I have to be honest with you because I see this in my practice every week. After giving up ice cream, you reached for what felt safer. Frozen yogurt, sugar-free pints with that reassuring blue label, light or fat-free brands you trusted. And some of those substitutes are quietly raising your blood sugar more than the ice cream you sacrificed. Today I'm giving you back 5 ice creams you can safely bring home, and warning you about 3 misleading you under words like diabetes-friendly. Pay attention to number 5 in the good list. It costs under $2 per serving and beats every premium brand. Stay to the end because number 1 in the warning list may be in your freezer right now. Tell me something first. How many years has it been since you enjoyed a real bowl of ice cream without guilt? Type the number in the comments below. And if this conversation feels useful, subscribe. Like keeping in touch with a family doctor you trust. Now let me explain the science that changes everything. Here is what was missed in all those warnings you received. Ice cream is not the enemy of your blood sugar. The kind of ice cream is. And the difference comes down to what I call the 3 breaks. When you eat real, full-fat ice cream, the cream itself slows down how fast your stomach empties. That is break number 1. The dairy protein triggers a hormone called GLP-1, the very same hormone that drugs like Ozempic try to imitate. That is break 2. And the cold temperature forces your stomach to warm the food before it can even begin digestion. Break 3. 3 natural breaks, working together on every spoonful. That 2024 clinical trial I mentioned, conducted at the Dasman Diabetes Institute, tested real type 2 diabetes patients eating different kinds of ice cream and measured their actual glucose response. The differences between products were not small. They were dramatic. The breaks work, but only when the product still has them intact. In the 5 choices I am about to give you, at least one of those 3 breaks is working powerfully. That is why they belong back in your freezer. Let's start with number 1. And this is the one I want you to try first because it is the gentlest on your blood sugar and the easiest to make. Cottage cheese ice cream. I know what you're thinking. Cottage cheese in ice cream? Trust me on this. When you blend full-fat cottage cheese until it's completely smooth and then freeze it, the texture comes out almost identical to soft serve. But here's the magic. A single half-cup serving gives you about 14 grams of protein. That is roughly 3 times the protein in a typical scoop of ice cream. Why does that matter so much for your body? 14 grams of protein hits hard on that GLP-1 hormone I mentioned earlier. It nearly doubles the time food sits in your stomach, which means glucose trickles into your bloodstream slowly and gently. No sharp spike, no crash an hour later. And there is something specific to your stage of life that almost nobody talks about. After 60, your body naturally starts losing muscle. Doctors call it sarcopenia. Every gram of protein you can fit into your day helps slow that loss. So you are not just protecting your blood sugar, you are protecting your strength, your balance, your independence. Here is the recipe. 1 cup of full-fat cottage cheese. And I mean full fat, not the reduced version. The fat is doing real work here. Add 1 tablespoon of allulose or erythritol, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and a handful of frozen berries if you want. Blend until silky, freeze for 2 to 3 hours, give it a stir, and eat. About 120 calories per half cup with only 5 to 7 grams of carbs. But I know cottage cheese is not for everyone, so if you want something more familiar, number 2 is something that tastes closer to the ice cream you remember. Homemade frozen Greek yogurt. And I need to stress that word, homemade. Because the frozen yogurt sitting in your supermarket freezer and the frozen yogurt you make in your kitchen are 2 completely different products. Hold on to that thought. I will come back to it in the warning list. When you freeze full-fat Greek yogurt at home, you get a texture as creamy as traditional ice cream, but you also get 8 to 10 grams of protein per serving, the natural fat that acts as one of those 3 breaks, and something extra that matters enormously after 60, live probiotic cultures. Lactobacillus and the other beneficial bacteria in real Greek yogurt have been shown to gradually improve insulin sensitivity over weeks and months, so you are not just dodging a single spike. You are slowly retraining how your body handles glucose altogether. But please, please listen carefully. It must be full-fat Greek yogurt. The fat-free version strips away one of the most important breaks in this entire system. Without that fat, glucose enters your blood faster, and the whole protective effect collapses. The recipe is simple. 2 cups of full-fat plain Greek yogurt, 2 tablespoons of allulose or erythritol, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, a handful of berries. Pour it into an ice cream maker, or just put it in a freezer-safe container and stir every 30 minutes until firm. Let me tell you about Catherine. 68 years old, walked into my office months ago, having given up every dessert in her house after her HbA1c hit 8.1. 3 months later, she came back. The number on her chart said 6.9. She looked at me almost embarrassed and said, "Doctor, I have to confess something. I have been eating frozen yogurt every single night after dinner." I asked her to explain. Half a cup, homemade, made exactly the way I just described. Every night after a proper dinner, served in this small glass cup, her mother's, she told me, because in her words, "If I eat from the carton, I will eat the whole carton." That small cup did what 6 months of strict deprivation could not. If you don't have time to make your own, there is a store-bought option I want you to know about. Number 3 is for the nights when you walk in from a long day and you simply do not have the energy to blend, freeze, and stir. You need something you can pull straight from the carton. And here is the good news. That option now exists in almost every major supermarket in America. Ice cream sweetened with erythritol and stevia. Both of these sweeteners have a glycemic index of 0. Erythritol passes through your body almost completely unchanged. It never gets broken down into glucose. Stevia comes from a plant leaf and has been used as a sweetener for centuries in South America. Neither one provokes an insulin response in any meaningful way. 3 brands I trust you to find. Halo Top, particularly the Golden Blondie and Vanilla Bean flavors. About 21 grams of carbs per 2/3 cup. Available at Walmart, Target, and Costco. Enlightened Keto line, only 1 gram of net carbs per serving, the strictest option if you want tight control. And so delicious, no sugar added, made on a coconut milk base. Perfect if dairy gives you trouble. When you read the label, look for erythritol and stevia leaf extract near the top of the ingredient list. That is your green light. One honest warning. After 60, the gut can become more sensitive to sugar alcohols. Erythritol in large amounts can cause bloating in some people. So please, start with a 1/4 cup, not the half cup the label suggests. See how your body responds before going bigger. A quick check-in before I keep going. Have you ever brought home a pint of Halo Top or Enlightened? Tell me in the comments which flavor you tried and what your glucose meter showed an hour or 2 later. Your real-world experience matters far more than any number printed on a carton, and other people watching this video need to hear it. And please, stay with me through number 5, because number 5, the one I teased at the start of this video, costs less than $2 a serving, beats every single commercial product I have just named, and you almost certainly already have the ingredients in your kitchen. Now let me introduce you to a sweetener almost nobody over 60 has heard of, and the science behind it was published just last year. Number 4, ice cream sweetened with allulose. And this one deserves your full attention because what the science says about it is genuinely new. In 2024, a meta-analysis was published in the journal Metabolism Open, Researchers Ayesh and colleagues pooled together 6 clinical trials covering 126 patients with type 2 diabetes. The conclusion stopped me cold when I first read it. Allulose did not just stay neutral on blood sugar the way erythritol does. Allulose actively lowered post-meal glucose levels. It reduced the total area under the glucose curve. It cut down the time patients spent above the safe blood sugar threshold. Let me put that in plain language. Erythritol is like a neutral passenger. It rides along, it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt. Allulose is more like an extra brake. A fourth brake on top of the 3 natural ones we talked about earlier. It actually pulls glucose down. 2 brands I want you to know by name. Rebel Ice Cream, built on a base of full-fat heavy cream with 0 added sugar. Real-world data from people wearing continuous glucose monitors shows their blood sugar rises only about 15 milligrams per deciliter after a serving. That is remarkably low. The second is Nick's Swedish Style, a blend of allulose, erythritol, and stevia with a wide variety of flavors that taste closer to traditional ice cream than almost anything else in this category. You will find these at Whole Foods, at Sprouts, at Kroger, and slowly they are appearing at Walmart and Target. I will be honest with you about the cost. These run $6 to $7 a pint. They are more expensive than Halo Top. This is the option for someone who wants the best blood sugar outcome from a commercial product and is willing to invest a little more for it. All 4 of these I just shared are genuinely excellent, but number 5, the one I promised at the very start of this video, you will not find it in any supermarket freezer. Number 5, the one I have been teasing since the opening of this video, a simple frozen banana, turned into something that beats every commercial product I have just named at any price. I know how this sounds. Let me show you the science, because this is where it gets remarkable. A fresh banana has a glycemic index of around 51. Not terrible, but not what you want either. But here is what almost nobody talks about. When you freeze that banana and then let it thaw, a process called retrogradation happens inside the starch. A portion of that regular starch converts into something called resistant starch. And resistant starch lives up to its name. It resists digestion. It does not get broken down into glucose. It passes through you almost untouched. The Johns Hopkins Patient Guide to Diabetes and the agricultural research published by Clemson University Extension both confirm the same thing. Resistant starch improves insulin sensitivity and significantly blunts the post-meal blood sugar response. Here is the 4-ingredient recipe I want you to write down. 1 ripe banana, sliced into coins, frozen for at least 4 hours. That triggers the resistant starch I just described. 2 tablespoons of natural peanut butter with no added sugar. That powerfully triggers GLP-1 and adds healthy fat for satiety. Half a teaspoon of true Ceylon cinnamon. This improves how your GLUT4 transporters carry glucose out of your blood. And 1 tablespoon of unsweetened pure cocoa powder. The epicatechin compound in cocoa supports your pancreatic beta cells, the very cells that produce insulin. Drop everything into a food processor or a strong blender. Blend until smooth. You will get a texture indistinguishable from soft serve, with sweetness coming entirely from the banana itself, no added sugar of any kind. The price? Under $2 a serving. Cheaper than Halo Top. No sugar alcohols to upset your gut. Real food, real nutrients. One important caution. Every body responds a little differently. The first time you try this, check your glucose meter 1 to 2 hours after eating. Especially if your HbA1c is above 8.0, or if you are on insulin. Your meter tells the truth about your body. Now you have 5 ice creams to safely return to your freezer. But before you head to the store, I have to warn you about 3 products being marketed as safe for diabetics. And one of them may be sitting in your freezer right now. Let's begin counting down the 3 to avoid. Starting with warning number 3, and this one is going to feel counterintuitive at first. Low-fat, fat-free, and light ice cream. I know. For years, you have been told that fat is the enemy. So when you walked down the freezer aisle and saw fat-free on the label, you reached for it with a clear conscience. That instinct made perfect sense. But here is the cruel twist the food industry never told you. When manufacturers strip the fat out of ice cream, the product loses its richness. So to keep it palatable, they add more sugar. More sugar going in, and the fat break, the one that slowed everything down, is gone. The result? A sharper, faster, higher blood sugar spike than if you had just eaten the regular version. The data backs this up. The team at Signos tracked over 600 people using continuous glucose monitors and found that soft-serve and reduced-fat ice cream raised blood sugar by an average of 43.9 milligrams per deciliter. Regular full-fat ice cream? Only 35.4. That gap is real, and it is meaningful. I want you to hear me. This was not your fault. This was... After a cholesterol warning from your doctor, you switched to low-fat in good faith. That was a marketing victory, not a medical recommendation. The brands to leave on the shelf: Breyers fat-free, Edy's and Dreyer's slow-churned light, Skinny Cow, Sherbet, which is low in fat but loaded with sugar, and Sorbet, which is pure sugar in a fancy outfit with no break working at all. The shortcut for reading any label: if you see the words light, fat-free, low-fat, or skinny, put it back in the freezer. The next warning may be the most misunderstood food in the entire health aisle. Warning number 2. Commercial frozen yogurt. The product an entire generation has been told is the healthy alternative to ice cream. I want you to see this side by side because the numbers will shock you. Dannon Light and Fit Frozen Yogurt, marketed as the responsible choice, contains 21 grams of sugar in a half cup. Häagen-Dazs Vanilla, the premium full-fat ice cream you have been avoiding, 20 grams of sugar in the same half cup. Read that again. The frozen yogurt has more sugar than the ice cream it was supposed to replace. And it gets worse, because frozen yogurt is also low in fat. So you have more sugar going in, with no fat break to slow it down. Sugar hits the bloodstream faster, harder, sharper. It is the worst of both worlds, packaged with a healthy-looking label. Now if you walk into one of those self-serve frozen yogurt shops, the ones with the swirl machines and the topping bars, please listen carefully. A medium cup, by the time you add granola, chocolate sauce, and sprinkles, can carry 60 to 80 grams of sugar in a single serving. That is one of the highest glycemic loads you can buy in any food store, anywhere. I want to be very clear about one thing. The homemade frozen Greek yogurt I described earlier. That is a completely different food. I am not contradicting myself. What you make at home with full-fat Greek yogurt is one thing. What comes out of a commercial machine or a supermarket carton is another. The chains and brands to avoid: Pinkberry, Menchie's, 16 Handles, Red Mango, Yogurtland, the Yasso frozen yogurt pints, Dannon Light and Fit frozen yogurt, Stonyfield frozen yogurt. But the worst offender, the trap I promised to expose at the very start, is not frozen yogurt. The worst one wears the label that says safest. This is the most dangerous trap of all. Warning number 1, the most dangerous offender on this entire list: sugar-free ice cream sweetened with maltitol. This is a Trojan horse. It looks like a gift to people with diabetes. The words sugar-free printed proudly across the carton, the marketing aimed straight at your diagnosis. But hidden inside the ingredient list is something that attacks your blood sugar almost as hard as regular sugar does. Here are the numbers. Maltitol has a glycemic index between 35 in its powder form and 52 in its syrup form. Its insulin index sits at 27. That is dramatically higher than every other sugar alcohol on the market. Peer-reviewed nutrition research has stated it plainly. Maltitol has a significant impact on blood glucose, unlike erythritol, which has almost none. And then the cruel multiplier. Because the carton says sugar-free, people eat double the serving they would normally have. So the total glucose impact in real life sometimes ends up worse than if they had eaten regular ice cream. For someone over 60, there is one more danger I have to mention. Maltitol acts as a laxative. It causes diarrhea, bloating, and dehydration. And dehydration in an older body concentrates the glucose already in your blood, making the spike even sharper. Let me tell you about Kenneth. 71 years old, walked into my office with an HbA1c of 7.4, completely confused. He insisted he had not touched sugar in 6 months. I asked him to walk me through what he was eating. He proudly pulled the ingredient label from his pocket. He saved every label since his diagnosis. That was his habit. Breyer's no sugar added. 2 to 3 times a week. The third ingredient on that label, maltitol. I asked him to switch to Halo Top. 3 months later, his HbA1c came down to 6.6. What he said to me at that visit, I still remember. "Doctor, I did everything they told me to do, but it feels like somebody forgot to tell me one important piece of information. The brands to leave on the shelf: Breyer's no sugar added, Turkey Hill no sugar added, Edie's and Dreyer's no sugar added, and almost every store brand sugar-free version at the big chains. The 5-second label rule. Scan the first 3 ingredients. If you see maltitol, maltitol syrup, or sorbitol, put it down. You do not need to read another word. That is what I needed you to know. You now have enough to make a different decision the next time you walk down that freezer aisle." Let me pull it all together into one simple, practical rule you can live by. Ice cream was never the enemy. The kind of ice cream, and the moment you eat it, that is where the truth has been hiding all along. After years of being told to deprive yourself of every small pleasure, you have just taken back 5 safe choices, and you now have the tools to recognize the 3 traps that mislead the most well-intentioned people. You can enjoy one of life's simple pleasures again, without guilt, without fear. I want to give you 4 specific actions you can take starting tonight. Call this your ice cream after 60 protocol. First, open your freezer tonight. Pick up every sugar-free product on the shelf and read the first 3 ingredients. If you see maltitol, throw it out. Second, the timing rule. Only eat ice cream after a dinner that contains at least 20 grams of protein and some real fat. Never on an empty stomach. Never between meals. Third, portion discipline. Scoop half a cup into a small bowl and put the carton straight back in the freezer. Never, ever eat from the carton. Fourth, gather your own data. Check your glucometer 1 to 2 hours after trying any new product. Your meter speaks louder than any chart in any book. Of the 8 ice creams I covered today, which one is in your freezer right now? After watching this video, which one will you try this week and which one will you throw out tonight? Type the names in the comments. I want to know. And if there is someone you love who gave up ice cream the day they got their diagnosis, send them this video. They deserve to hear the truth their doctor may never have shared. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want to see you healthy, strong, and enjoying the best years of your life with the people you love. This video is for education. Please do not change your insulin, your metformin, or any diabetes medication based on what I shared today. Any change to your prescriptions must go through the doctor who knows your full history. Have a healthy week ahead. Subscribe, and here's something most people over 60 have never been told. A team at the Cleveland Clinic ran the numbers on more than 4,000 people, and what they published in Nature Medicine back in 2023 stopped a lot of doctors in their tracks. People walking around with high blood levels of one common sugar-free sweetener were close to twice as likely to have a heart attack or a stroke over the next 3 years. Twice. And here's the part that should make you sit up. That sweetener isn't hiding in soda or candy bars. It's hiding inside the very desserts labeled diabetic-friendly. The ones you might be reaching for after dinner precisely because you thought you were doing the safe thing. Now, this is an association, not a guarantee, and I'll be honest with you about that. But when you're past 60 and your heart already has some miles on it, an association like that is not something I'd ask you to ignore. So let me make you a promise. Today I'm going to walk you through 5 desserts that actually satisfy the craving and stay gentle on your blood sugar after 60 days. And 3 that look innocent while quietly pushing your numbers up. And pay close attention to the worst one, sitting at number 1, because it's the one most people genuinely believe is the healthiest choice of all. Stay with me to the end. Before we get into it, tell me something. What's your go-to dessert after dinner? Just type it down in the comments. 1 or 2 words is plenty. And if you want more trustworthy medical guidance on keeping your blood sugar steady after 60, subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you. Let me clear something up right away, because fear keeps a lot of good people eating worse than they need to. The problem was never that you ate something sweet. The problem is what you ate and how it was built. Here's what changes after 60. Your body clears glucose out of the bloodstream more slowly than it used to. The same slice of cake that a 30-year-old burns off in an hour can leave your blood sugar sitting high and staying high for much longer. That dessert isn't doing anything different, your body is. And that's not a flaw in you. It's simply biology aging, the way a faucet that once ran fast starts to trickle. So if the question is, can I still enjoy dessert? The answer is yes, as long as you understand the 3 levers that quietly tame almost any sweet thing you put on a plate. The first is fiber, the second is protein, the third is healthy fat. Each one slows down how fast sugar gets into your blood. Think of them as the brakes on your blood sugar. A dessert that's nothing but refined flour and sugar has no brakes at all. It floors the accelerator. But add fiber, protein, or a little good fat, and suddenly that same sweetness arrives gently instead of all at once. That's the whole secret. Every one of the 5 desserts I'm about to give you is built around those 3 breaks. Once you see how they work, you'll never look at your dessert plate the same way again. Let's start with the first one. Number 1 is the one I'd build everything else around because it has more solid science behind it than almost any treat you can name. Plain Greek yogurt with a handful of berries. Start with the yogurt itself. In March of 2024, the FDA did something it rarely does. It allowed a qualified health claim stating that eating yogurt regularly, at least 2 cups a week, may lower the risk of type 2 diabetes. That's a federal agency, not a marketing slogan. And the reason is in what yogurt carries: protein to slow digestion, and probiotics that support the gut. Then add the berries. There's research out of the VA system in men averaging around 67 years old, where roughly a cup of blueberries a day for 8 weeks improved both their HbA1c and their fructosamine. 2 different windows into long-term blood sugar control. Now here's where people trip. You want plain Greek yogurt. The fruit-flavored cups sitting next to it on the shelf can carry as much sugar as a dessert you'd be warned away from. And I'll come back to that trap near the end of this video because it catches more people than you'd think. Buy it plain and you bring the sweetness yourself with fresh or frozen berries and maybe a sprinkle of seeds. In the warmer months, freeze the whole thing into popsicles. There was a man, newly diagnosed, frightened, the kind who throws out every sweet thing in the house the week he gets the news. He told his daughter he felt like he was being punished for getting old. He lived stripped down and miserable like that for a while. What pulled him back wasn't some elaborate plan. It was one small thing he could keep. Yogurt and blueberries, every night, in the same chipped bowl he refused to replace. Sometimes the simplest habit is the one that lasts. Number 2 is one I love teaching because you can almost watch the science happen in front of you. Chia pudding. Here's what makes it work. When chia seeds hit liquid, they swell and turn into a soft gel. That gel does something remarkable in your stomach. It physically slows down digestion, so the sugar from your meal trickles into your blood instead of flooding in. Picture a sponge sitting in your stomach, soaking up that rush and letting it out slowly. And this isn't a guess. A research group led by Dr. Vladimir Vuksan at the University of Toronto has studied chia for years. In their work, eating chia before or with a meal lowered the blood sugar spike afterward by somewhere around 20 to 30%. In one trial, baking chia into a cookie cut the total glucose load, what scientists measure as the area under the curve, by 22 to 30%. That's a real, measurable difference from a seed you can buy at any grocery store. Making it couldn't be simpler. Stir chia into unsweetened almond or other nut milk, let it sit in the fridge overnight, and by morning you've got pudding. Top it with berries. Honestly, it works just as well as a breakfast as it does a dessert. One word of caution, and this matters more after 60. Chia is rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and omega-3 can thin the blood a little. If you're taking a blood thinner like warfarin, that's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to ask your doctor before you make chia a daily habit. A quick conversation now saves you trouble later. Number 3 is going to surprise some of you, because I doubt anyone ever told you chocolate could earn a place on a list like this, but dark chocolate at 70% cacao or higher with a few strawberries to dip, yes, that counts. The reason sits in the cacao itself. Dark chocolate is rich in compounds called flavonols, and one in particular, epicatechin. In December of 2024, researchers at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health published work in the BMJ showing that people who ate dark chocolate, and I want to stress dark, not milk, had a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. The thinking is that those flavonols improve the lining of your blood vessels and help slow how fast glucose gets absorbed. Now let me be straight with you, because this is exactly where these things get oversold. Dark chocolate is still candy, it still has sugar, it still has calories, and it is not medicine. What the science says is that it's a better choice than milk chocolate, not a free pass to eat the whole bar. A sensible portion is about 1 ounce, roughly 28 grams. That's a square or two savored slowly, not a habit you let run away from you. And here's where the strawberries come in. Dip that dark chocolate in fresh strawberries, and the natural tartness of the fruit balances the bitterness, while the berries add fiber that further softens the sugar. The strawberries themselves are low on the glycemic scale, so you're not undoing the good you just did. It feels like an indulgence. It behaves like one of the smartest things on this list. Number 4 is the one that fills the house with the smell of something warm, and it takes about as much effort as turning on the oven, a baked apple with cinnamon and walnuts. Let's talk about why this works, piece by piece, because each part is pulling its weight. Start with the apple. A whole apple, not apple juice, not applesauce. Whole fruit, eaten as fruit, is actually linked to a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, because the fiber comes packaged right alongside the sugar. Then the walnuts. There's a meta-analysis on tree nuts showing that eating them regularly, around 56 grams a day, improved both HbA1c and fasting blood sugar. So those walnuts aren't just there for crunch. The healthy fat in them is one of those breaks I told you about, slowing the apple's natural sugar on its way into your blood. Now, cinnamon. You've probably heard cinnamon called a blood sugar miracle, and I want to be honest with you rather than sell you something. Several reviews do show cinnamon lowering fasting blood sugar, but the effect is modest, and on HbA1c, the results are inconsistent. So I'd call cinnamon a helpful supporting spice, a nice nudge in the right direction, not a treatment you should ever lean on. Putting it together is easy. Keep the skin on the apple, because that's where a lot of the fiber and the protective polyphenols live. Core it, bake it with cinnamon and a little nutmeg until it's soft, and scatter walnuts on top. It's the kind of dessert that feels like a reward and behaves like a steadying hand on your blood sugar. Number 5 is the one I save for last in this group, because it answers the question people are almost afraid to ask out loud. Can I still have ice cream? In a sense, yes. It's called banana nice cream, and you don't need an ice cream maker to make it. Here's the trick, and it all comes down to one decision: how ripe your banana is. A banana that's still a little green carries more of something called resistant starch, a kind of starch your body doesn't break down into sugar as easily. Back in 1992, a researcher named Hermanson measured this in people with type 2 diabetes, and the difference was striking. A slightly underripe banana came in with a glycemic index around 43, while a fully ripe, spotty one shot up to about 74. Same fruit, completely different effect on your blood sugar, decided entirely by ripeness. Now I'm going to be straight with you because this is the sweetest item on the whole list. A banana has more sugar than anything else I've recommended today, so this one comes with rules. Keep the portion small, blend in a handful of berries to pull that sugar load down, and eat it after a proper meal, not on its own, and I'll explain exactly why that timing matters in just a moment. The method is simple. Slice a slightly green banana, freeze the pieces, then blend them until they turn thick and creamy, like soft serve. That's it. No machine, no added sugar. Just a little honesty about which banana you reach for. I just told you to eat that banana after a meal, and I want to stop here, because this next idea might be the most useful thing in the whole video. When you eat your dessert matters just as much as what it is. Here's the part that catches people off guard. Even the best dessert on this list, even plain yogurt with berries, can spike your blood sugar if you eat it on an empty stomach. Drop sugar into an empty tank and it races straight into your blood with nothing to slow it. But the order you eat your food in is a break that costs you nothing. The science on this is genuinely impressive. Researchers at Vail Cornell, publishing in Diabetes Care, had people eat their carbohydrates after their protein and vegetables instead of first. The result? Blood sugar in the half hour to hour afterward dropped by around 29 to 37%, and by one measure, the spike was up to 73% lower. The same pattern held true in people with prediabetes. Same food, same calories, only the order changed. So here's the rule. Simple enough to remember at any age. Never eat something sweet when your stomach is empty, and never treat dessert as a standalone late-night snack. Eat it right after a meal that had some protein and vegetables in it, so your dessert lands on a full, protected stomach. Now let me ask you something, because I'm curious where you fall. Do you usually have your dessert right after dinner, or do you save it as a separate little treat later in the evening? Type it down in the comments. I have a feeling the answers are going to be split, and that split says a lot, so that's the safe side of the plate. Now let me turn this around, because knowing what to enjoy is only half the picture. You also need to know what's working against you, and some of these are going to look a lot more innocent than they are. We're going to count down 3, and the order matters, because they get more surprising as we go. Let's begin with number 3, store-bought cake and frosted cupcakes. Now, I know this one feels obvious, but I want you to understand exactly why it's a double hit, because it's worse than just sugary. Start with the cake itself. It's built on refined white flour, and refined flour behaves almost like straight sugar in your body. It breaks down fast and sends your blood sugar climbing in a hurry. That alone would be enough to put it on the list. But then comes the frosting. That thick icing piles on more sugar, and it brings saturated fat along with it. And after 60, when your heart often already has some wear on it, that combination of a blood sugar spike plus saturated fat is exactly the kind of 1-2 punch you don't want landing regularly. This isn't about never celebrating a birthday. A slice of cake at a real occasion is part of a life worth living. The trouble starts when something built for a special day quietly becomes a Tuesday night habit. Keep it rare, and keep it for the moments that earn it. Which brings me to number 2. Number 2 takes everything wrong with that cake and makes it worse by adding one more problem on top. Donuts and deep-fried sweets in general. Here's the layering, because that's what makes these so hard on you. You start with the same refined flour and sugar, so the blood sugar climb is already built in. But then you drop that dough into hot oil. Now you've added a heavy load of fat, often the kind that's been heated and processed in ways that make your body's insulin resistance worse over time. So a donut isn't just spiking your sugar, it's making it harder for your body to handle sugar at all, meal after meal. That's the difference between something that's merely sweet and something that's actively working against your metabolism. And donuts have a lot of cousins worth naming, because they slip past people under friendlier names. The honey bun in the gas station, the cinnamon roll, the churro. Same refined flour and fried story, different wrapping. While I'm at it, let me warn you about sugar in liquid form. A milkshake, a sweetened smoothie, a glass of fruit juice, those hit your blood sugar even faster than the solid stuff. Because there's no chewing to slow anything down. You drink it, and it's in your blood almost immediately. But as bad as all of that is, none of it is the one I'm most concerned about. Because number one isn't the dessert you'd expect. It's the one you've been told is safe. Here it is. The number one dessert I want you to be careful with isn't sitting in the bakery case. It's the one wearing the friendliest label of all. The sugar-free and diabetic cookies, candies, and cakes that you've been reaching for precisely because you thought they were the responsible choice. Let me show you why that label can be a trap. Many of these products are sweetened with something called maltitol. It sounds harmless, but maltitol has a glycemic index of around 52, and ordinary table sugar sits around 62 to 65. So that sugar-free cookie is still raising your blood sugar, just a little less than the real thing, while the label has you believing it does nothing at all. And remember, these treats are usually built on the same refined flour as everything else. The sweetener changed, the foundation didn't. Now let me close the loop I opened at the very start of this video. Remember that Cleveland Clinic study, published in Nature Medicine, looking at more than 4,000 people? The sweetener in question was erythritol. People with high blood levels of it had close to double the risk of a heart attack or stroke over the following 3 years, and the follow-up work suggested it made platelets, the cells that form clots, more likely to clump together. For someone over 60 who already has heart concerns, that's not a footnote. That's the headline. But I promised you honesty, and here it is. I am not telling you every sugar-free product is dangerous, and I won't let you walk away thinking that. Stevia and monk fruit are sweeteners that barely touch your blood sugar and carry none of this concern. The problem is narrow and specific: maltitol, which still spikes you, and erythritol, which carries that heart signal. And even there, this is an association. Something researchers are still studying, not a closed case. There was a woman who trusted that label completely. She kept a whole cupboard stocked with diabetic cookies and ate them freely, no guilt at all, because the box said sugar-free, and sugar-free meant safe. When her numbers and her heart didn't cooperate the way she expected, she was genuinely blindsided. It stays with me. Seeing someone do everything they believed was right and get misled by the very word printed on the package to reassure them. So, if that's what to avoid, what should you actually eat and how should you eat it? Let me pull it all together. Let me leave you with the heart of all this, because if you remember nothing else, remember this. After 60, dessert is not forbidden. It never was. What decides whether a sweet helps you or hurts you comes down to two things: which dessert you choose and when you eat it. Build it around those 3 breaks I gave you: fiber, protein, and healthy fat. Eat it after a meal, not on an empty stomach. Do those 2 things, and you've taken back most of the control you thought you'd lost. That's not deprivation. That's just understanding how your own body works now. So here's exactly what to do starting tonight. First, build your dessert around one of the 5 I gave you: plain Greek yogurt with berries, chia pudding, an ounce of dark chocolate, a baked apple with walnuts, or a small banana nice cream. Pick the ones you'll actually enjoy, because a habit you like is a habit you keep. Second, never eat anything sweet on an empty stomach. Always let it follow a meal with protein and vegetables so your blood sugar stays protected. Third, turn the sugar-free label over and read it. Avoid maltitol, and if you have any history of heart trouble, be cautious with erythritol. Lean towards stevia or monk fruit instead. Fourth, decide your portion before you start and serve it onto a plate rather than eating straight from the container, because the container has no bottom and your willpower does. And fifth, bring one question to your doctor. If you're on a blood thinner, ask whether daily chia or omega-3 is right for you. Or simply ask what blood sugar target makes sense if you'd like to add one small dessert to your day. It's a fair question, and a good doctor will welcome it. Now I'd love to hear from you. Of the 5 good desserts, which one are you going to try first? Or which of the 3 to avoid surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if there's someone in your life who trusts that sugar-free label or who keeps reaching for the wrong thing without realizing it, send them this video. It might be the conversation that changes how they eat. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. Everything I've shared today is here to help you understand your own body and feel more in control of it, not to replace the doctor who knows your history. And please hear me on this one. Never stop or change any medication on your own without talking to the doctor treating you first. That conversation matters too much to skip. Take good care of yourself this week. You've earned a dessert that loves you back. Subscribe so I can keep walking through this with you, and I'll see you in the next one. If a doctor ever told you that having diabetes means cake is off the table for good, I want you to take a breath, because that is not the whole story. Years ago, researchers at a hospital in London had 9 people with type 2 diabetes eat 3 slices of cake every single day for more than 3 weeks straight. And when they measured their blood sugar at the end, it hadn't risen at all. I know what that loss feels like. You sit at your own grandchild's birthday, everyone passing plates around you, and you wave the cake away and tell yourself it's fine. After 60, when your body already handles sugar differently, that quiet little no thank you starts to feel like something you've simply given up on. So let me be honest with you about that London study, because the details matter. It was a small group, the calories were kept balanced, and the sugar was spread evenly across the day. The secret wasn't just the cake, it was how it was eaten. That's what I want to give you today. 5 kinds of cake that truly are gentle on blood sugar after 60 when they're made and eaten the right way. And stay with me to the end, because one of them is the cake almost everyone is convinced is the most forbidden of all. It's near the end. Don't skip it. Before we go further, tell me one thing. Which cake have you been telling yourself you can never touch again? Type its name in the comments below. And if you'd like to walk this road alongside others over 60 who are working to live well every day, subscribe and join us. It only takes a click. So before we get to the cakes themselves, I need you to understand one idea, because it's the lens you'll use to judge every single one of them. The problem was never really the cake sitting on the plate. It's what's inside it, meeting a body that has quietly changed. Think about what a typical bad slice actually is. White refined flour, stripped of its fiber, then loaded with sugar, and very often topped with a thick layer of sugary frosting on top of that. That's a double sugar punch, and it hits fast. Your blood sugar doesn't climb gently, it spikes. Now here is the part that matters for you and me, the part most people are never told. The way your body handles glucose naturally weakens with age. This isn't a personal failing. It's biology. More than 1 in 5 adults between 60 and 74 are living with type 2 diabetes, and the research going back decades, including work published in the American Journal of Physiology, shows that glucose tolerance simply declines as we get older. 2 things happen. Your body slowly loses what we call its first phase insulin response, that quick early burst of insulin. And at the same time, your cells grow more resistant to insulin signal. Let me make that real. When you were 40, your first phase insulin was like a fast, ready sponge sitting right by the counter. The moment sugar spilled, it wiped it up almost instantly. After 60, that sponge is slower, and it's smaller. So the sugar spreads out across the counter and sits there far longer than it used to. Same spill, very different cleanup. That is exactly why a slice that did you no harm at 40 can quietly push your numbers up at 66. But here's where it turns hopeful, because once you understand the mechanism, you can work with it. 3 things decide whether a cake is gentle or punishing. 1, the type of flour. 2, how much sugar and what kind. And 3, whether there's fiber, protein, or fat in there to slow the whole thing down. That last one is powerful. In recipe studies where fiber was added to a cake, its glycemic index dropped from 68 down to 52. That's a 23% fall from the very same dessert. Hold on to those 3 levers. And keep one thing in the back of your mind, because one cake on today's list sounds like the healthiest of them all. And the version most people eat might be the worst offender on the table. I'll show you the real one shortly. Let's start with number 1, and I'm starting here on purpose, because this is the gold standard. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this one swap: almond flour cake. The whole secret comes down to that first lever I just gave you, the flour, and the difference is bigger than you'd ever guess from looking at the 2 bags side by side. Take a 1/4 cup of regular white flour and you're looking at around 24 grams of carbohydrate. Now take that same 1/4 cup but in almond flour. You're down to roughly 6 grams of carb, and 3 of those 6 are fiber. So the carbohydrate that actually reaches your bloodstream and acts on your sugar is a tiny fraction of what white flour delivers. You haven't given up the cake, you've just quietly pulled most of the sugar load out from underneath it. But it isn't only about having less, it's about what almonds bring with them. And this is where it gets interesting. The glycemic index of almond flour sits below 40, which means it releases its energy slowly, no sharp spike. And almonds are rich in magnesium, which matters more than most people realize. Magnesium is one of the minerals your body leans on to use insulin properly. And here's the troubling part. Somewhere between 25 and 38% of people with type 2 diabetes are running low on it. Research on almond flour points to the same direction, that restoring magnesium helps insulin do its job. So the very flour you're baking with is feeding a mineral your blood sugar control depends on. And almonds don't just sit there quietly. They actively pull glucose down. In crossover trials with people who had trouble managing glucose, adding almonds to a high glycemic meal lowered their blood sugar 2 hours after eating, and it did it in a dose-response way, meaning the more almonds added, within reason, the greater the effect. Anywhere from 30 to 90 grams made a measurable difference, and around 60 grams brought down both blood sugar and insulin levels at once. So this isn't a flour that's merely less bad. It's working in your favor. Now, let me be clear about what this is, because I don't want you walking away with the wrong idea. This is still cake. Portion still matters. But picture an almond flour base for a birthday cake, or almond cookies, and you've got something you can genuinely sit down and enjoy. The natural fat and protein in those almonds, that's not a flaw in the recipe. That's the very reason the whole thing stays gentle. It's the slow down built right into the ingredient. That's number 1. Now let me give you a second flour to keep in your kitchen. Number 2 is coconut flour cake. And I love this one as a partner to the first because it works on the very same principle, change the flour, but it gives you a second option that's easy to find and just as friendly to your numbers. Here's why coconut flour earns its place. It is remarkably high in fiber and very low in the carbohydrate that actually reaches your blood. Remember that third lever I gave you, fiber slowing the whole thing down? Coconut flour has that built right in. All that fiber acts like a brake on how fast the sugar gets absorbed. So even something like a coconut flour pound cake or a simple loaf releases its energy slowly instead of all at once. Now let me give you a practical tip, because if you've ever tried to bake with this flour, you may have ended up with something dry and crumbly. Coconut flour drinks up liquid like a sponge. It needs far more eggs and more liquid than you'd expect. And here's the quiet bonus in that. All those extra eggs add protein, and protein is yet another speed bump on the sugar's path into your blood. So the very thing that makes coconut flour tricky to bake with is also making the finished cake gentler. But I have to clear up one trap here, because it catches a lot of careful people. Do not assume gluten-free means safe for your blood sugar. They are not the same thing, not even close. Plenty of gluten-free cakes are built on rice flour, and rice flour can carry a glycemic index anywhere from 70 all the way up to 95. That's spike territory. So a label shouting gluten-free tells you nothing about what it'll do to your numbers. The flour is the answer. Always look at the flour. And the same honest rule applies to coconut flour that applied to almond. It's only gentle when it hasn't been packed with sugar. You still want your sweetness coming from a source that barely moves your blood sugar, and you still want a sensible portion. Get those right. and coconut flour gives you a warm, satisfying cake that works with your body instead of against it. That's 2 flours in your corner now. But the next cake is where things get really interesting, because it's the one I warned you about. Number 3 is carrot cake, and this is the one I told you to watch for because it hides a real paradox, and untangling it might change how you see your whole dessert plate. Let me tell you about Margaret. She was 71 when she came to see me, and she sat down genuinely puzzled, almost a little hurt. Her afternoon blood sugar kept reading high, and she couldn't make sense of it because in her mind she was eating well. As we walked through her day, it came out. Every single afternoon, she had a slice of carrot cake from the bakery down her street, and she said it with a small, sheepish smile. "Well, it's basically a salad with frosting, isn't it?" She even kept her slices in an old biscuit tin on the counter, and somewhere along the way she'd quietly filed that cake under my vegetables. She wasn't being careless. She'd been told carrots are good for her, and she believed it. So here's the hard truth about that bakery version. A typical one is built on several cups of white sugar and brown sugar, white refined flour, and then crowned with a thick cream cheese frosting. To anyone watching their carbs, calling that healthy is like calling an organic potato chip a health food. The word carrot on the menu was never the thing protecting her. But, and this is the turn, the carrot itself, the carrot is genuinely on your side. A real carrot has a glycemic index around 47, and because of all its fiber, its glycemic load per serving is only about 1.6. That is tiny. The vegetable was never the villain. The villain moved in with the sugar and the white flour. And now think back to the very start of this video, those 3 slices a day in that London study, the ones that didn't raise anyone's blood sugar. That cake was carrot cake. The work came out of Hammersmith Hospital in London, led by Professor Gary Frost. 9 patients with type 2 diabetes, 3 slices a day, 24 days. And at the end, no rise in blood sugar, no weight gain, no jump in cholesterol, and no drop in insulin sensitivity. But, and I'll always tell you the whole picture, that held because the calories were kept balanced and the sugar was spread across the day. It was a small group, studied over a short window. It isn't a license to eat the bakery slab. It's proof that the right version, eaten the right way, behaves completely differently. So what did Margaret's version end up being? An almond flour base, real grated carrot with its fiber kept intact, warm cinnamon, and just a restrained touch of sweetness. Same cake she loved, a completely different afternoon reading. Let me ask you something honestly before we move on. Have you been eating something healthy every afternoon and quietly wondering why your numbers just won't settle? Tell me what it is down in the comments. You might be surprised what's hiding in plain sight. Because the next one surprises almost everyone, for the opposite reason. Number 4 is cheesecake. And I can already hear what you're thinking because everyone thinks it. Something that rich, that creamy, that indulgent, surely that's the worst thing a person with diabetes could put on a plate. But stay with me, because the part everyone fears is actually the part working in your favor. Here's the mechanism. That thick, creamy filling is made from cream cheese, and cream cheese is high in fat and protein. Those two together do exactly what we keep coming back to today. They slow absorption right down. Cheese on its own has a low glycemic index and releases glucose slowly. So the very richness you've been taught to be afraid of is, biologically, the break. It's the reason the sugar doesn't rush in. So if the creamy part isn't the problem, where's the damage actually coming from? 2 places and only 2. The crust and the sugar. That classic graham cracker crust is white flour and sugar pressed into the bottom of the pan. Then there's sugar mixed through the filling itself. Put those together and a single slice of traditional cheesecake can carry around 34 grams of carbohydrate. The trouble was never the cheese. It was the floor it was standing on and the sugar stirred into it. Now watch what happens when you fix just those 2 things. Swap that crust for an almond flour base. Pull the added sugar way back, using a sweetener that barely touches your blood sugar. and top it with berries instead of a sugary glaze. Do that, and a slice can come down to roughly 7 or 8 grams of carbohydrate. From 34 down to under 8. And you didn't sacrifice the thing you love about it. The berries, by the way, aren't just decoration. They bring their own fiber and a dose of antioxidants along for the ride, so they're earning their spot. And this is exactly why I keep hammering on the same idea, because cheesecake proves it better than almost anything. The same word on the menu, cheesecake, can be one of the worst choices on the table or one of the gentlest. Nothing about the name tells you which. It comes down to the crust underneath and the sugar inside. Change those two, and you've changed the whole story. So that's the rich one handled. But now we arrive at number 5. This is the one I promised you all the way back at the start. The cake almost everyone is absolutely certain is the most forbidden of all. And I think it's going to be the one that surprises you most. And here we are at number 5, the one I've been promising you since the very beginning. Flourless dark chocolate cake. For most people, chocolate cake is the ultimate forbidden dessert, the thing you don't even let yourself look at after a diagnosis. So let me show you why the cake everyone fears most might actually be one of the gentlest on this entire list. But first, let me tell you about Raymond. He was 66, and from the day he was diagnosed, he had quietly turned himself into a spectator at his own family's table. Every gathering, every holiday, the dessert would come around, and he'd give a small wave of the hand and a polite, "None for me," and then sit there with a cup of black coffee while everyone else ate. He told me he'd started to feel like the sick one at the table, and then he said something that has stayed with me. At his granddaughter's birthday, he leaned over and asked me, almost under his breath, "Is there anything at that table I'm actually allowed to have?" That quiet question is the reason I make videos like this one. So, let me answer Raymond and answer you. Why does flourless chocolate cake work? Start with the name, flourless. There's no white flour in it at all, which means that double sugar punch we talked about simply isn't there. Instead, it's built from almond flour or cocoa, eggs, and good dark chocolate, 70% or higher. The eggs and the almond bring fat and protein, that built-in break again, and the result is a cake that keeps blood sugar remarkably steady. Some recipes come in at only around 5 or 6 grams of net carb per slice. From the cake people are most afraid of. Now, I'm going to stay honest with you, the way I always try to, because dark chocolate gets talked about like a health food, and that's not quite right either. It does contain genuine beneficial plant compounds, that part is true. But it's also rich and calorie dense. So this is not a cake you eat in a large wedge. A small portion is the whole key. Get that right, and you've got something real to enjoy. Push the portion too far, and you've undone the very thing that made it gentle. Both things are true at once, and you deserve to hear both. So there it is. The cake you were most convinced was off limits forever turns out to be, made this way, one of the kindest choices you can make for your blood sugar. That's the surprise I promised you, missed. And Raymond? A few months later, at the next family gathering, he had a proper slice of dark chocolate cake, made the right way, sitting right there with everyone else. He wasn't the spectator anymore. He was just a grandfather having dessert. That's not a medical miracle. It's something simpler and I think more important. It's a seat back at your own table. There's just one more thing I have to give you, because without it, even these 5 cakes can quietly work against you. Because here's the thing I won't let you leave without. The kind of cake matters, we've spent this whole time on it. But how you eat it decides easily half the story. Get this part wrong, and even the gentlest cake on the list can spike you. Let me give you the picture I want you to hold. Fiber, protein, and fat are speed bumps on the road. The sugar still travels into your blood. That doesn't change. But instead of racing in all at once, it slows down and arrives gently. Every cake we talked about today leans on those speed bumps. Now here's how you make sure they actually do their job. 3 simple rules. First, a real portion. 1 thin slice, not a big corner piece, not, well, it's the good kind, so I'll have 2. Second, timing. Eat it after a meal that already had some protein in it, never on an empty stomach, because an empty stomach lets the sugar in with nothing to slow it. And third, pair it. A few nuts, a spoon of plain unsweetened yogurt alongside, because protein and fiber take longer to digest than simple carbs, and they'll drag the whole absorption out for you. One quick caution, and I'll keep it brief because it deserves its own video. A sugar-free label does not automatically mean heart-safe. Some sweeteners are still being studied for their effect on the heart, with work from places like the Cleveland Clinic raising real questions. I cover that in detail in another video, the link's below. And the last thing, the most personal thing, every single body is different. The only way to truly know which of these cakes your body handles well is to check your own blood sugar about 2 hours after you eat it. That number is yours. It'll tell you, better than I ever could, exactly which cake belongs on your plate. Now let me pull this all together for you. So, let's bring it home. A diabetes diagnosis after 60 does not mean cake is gone from your life forever. I hope you can feel now why that was never the real story. It was never about the word on the menu, never about cake being some single forbidden thing. It comes down to 3 honest things: the type of flour, the amount of sugar, and the way you eat it. Get those right, and dessert can come back to your table without quietly stealing your health. That's the whole truth of it. So here's exactly where to start. 3 simple steps you can put to work this week. First, when you bake a cake or shop for one, reach for an almond flour or coconut flour base instead of white refined flour. That single swap does more than any other. Second, eat your slice thin and eat it after a meal that had some protein in it, never on an empty stomach, and put a few nuts or some berries alongside it. Third, the most useful habit of all. When you try a new kind, check your blood sugar about 2 hours later and write the number down. Over a few weeks, you'll have your own personal map of which cakes your body handles well. Bring that map to your doctor and let it guide the conversation together. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Of these 5, which one will you bake or buy first? Tell me down in the comments. And if you know someone, a husband, a sister, an old friend, who has quietly given up every dessert since the day they were diagnosed, send them this video. Let them know there are still choices on the table. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want to see you enjoying birthdays again, sitting in the middle of them, not off to the side. Everything I've shared today is here to teach and to guide you, not to replace the doctor who knows your case. So please never stop or change any medication on your own without speaking to them first. Take good care of yourself. Keep finding the small joys that make these years worth it, and subscribe so I can keep walking through this with you. I'll see you in the next one. For years, you've believed that the day you were diagnosed was the day cookies left your life for good. The birthday table you sat beside without touching a thing. The Christmas your grandchildren begged you to try just one, and you smiled and said no. I want to gently tell you something today, as the doctor who has watched too many people give up far more than they ever needed to. Most of that sacrifice was never necessary. Here's what almost no one explained to you. Whether a cookie sends your blood sugar climbing, or barely moves it at all, comes down to just 2 ingredients: the kind of flour and the kind of sweetener. Get those 2 right, and a great deal of what you've been denying yourself can quietly come back. So today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 best cookies for blood sugar after 60. 5 real options you can eat without wrecking your glucose. The 5th one surprises almost everyone because it's something you can buy right off the shelf. And stay with me to the end because I also need to warn you about a few cookies wearing a diabetic-friendly label that are quietly betraying the very trust they ask for. Let's begin. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, what's the one cookie you gave up after your diagnosis and how long has it been? Share it with me in the comments. And if you're one of the many people over 60 working to take control of your blood sugar, join our community here by subscribing. There are more of us than you'd think. So let's start where it actually matters. Because once you understand this, every cookie on today's list will make perfect sense to you. The problem was never the cookie. It was never the shape of it, or the warmth of it, or the memory tied to it. The problem is what most cookies are built from: the wrong flour and the wrong sugar. Fix those two things, and almost everything else about the cookie can stay exactly as you remember it. Let me explain why an ordinary cookie spikes your blood sugar so fast. White flour is starch that's already been stripped down and unlocked. Your body barely has to work on it. Within minutes, it breaks apart into glucose and floods your bloodstream. Refined sugar is even quicker because it's loading glucose in directly, no digestion required. And a typical cookie has almost nothing to slow that rush. No real fiber, no protein, no fat to act as a buffer. So the whole thing hits you in 15 to 30 minutes, like a fire catching all at once. Think of white flour as kindling that's already been soaked in oil. One spark and it's gone. The right flours are different. They smolder slowly, or they barely catch at all. That's the whole game, and it comes down to two levers you can pull. The first is the flour, choosing one that's low in fast starch and rich in fiber, protein, or healthy fat. The second is the sweetener, choosing one that doesn't drive your glucose up in the first place. Here's how that shapes everything coming next. The first 4 cookies on my list are about fixing the flour, and these are ones you make at home, where you control what goes in. Then the 5th is something different, a store-bought option that gets both levers right, the flour and the sweetener together. So keep that frame in mind as we go. And let's start with the first. The first one is the cookie I'd hand almost anyone as a starting point, and it's probably the most familiar name on this list: almond flour. Here's why it earns the top spot. Almond flour has almost no starch for your body to turn into glucose. Its glycemic index sits down near 0 to 5, which is about as close to nothing as a flour can get. And it brings something white flour never does: protein and healthy fat, which slow digestion and leave you genuinely satisfied with 1 or 2 cookies instead of reaching for 6. The evidence here is some of the strongest we have. A meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients in 2021 found that diets rich in almonds produced a meaningful drop in HbA1c, your 3-month blood sugar average, along with lower body weight in people with type 2 diabetes. And a separate meta-analysis of tree nuts in PLOS1 found that around 56 grams a day, roughly a handful, lowered both HbA1c and fasting glucose. That's not a single small study. That's the pattern showing up again and again. I think of Susan, who came to me at 65. For years, she had told herself no. Not a bite at birthdays, not one at Christmas with her grandchildren gathered around the table. She said to me, almost apologizing, I didn't want to be the one who couldn't be trusted with a plate of cookies. And the quiet truth I had to share with her was that most of that going without had never been required of her. She just hadn't been told there was another way. One honest word of caution. Almond flour is still calorie dense, so portion still counts. This isn't permission to finish the tray. And if you have a tree nut allergy, almond flour is off the table. But sunflower seed flour behaves much the same way and makes a fine substitute. With that settled, let's move to the second. The second one is a flour most people have never once thought to bake with, and that's exactly why it's worth your attention. Chickpea flour, sometimes called gram flour or besan. Now, chickpea flour does contain starch, so you might wonder why it belongs on a blood sugar list at all. The answer is in how that starch is packaged. In a chickpea, much of the starch stays locked inside intact cell walls, what we call resistant starch. Your digestion can't tear into it the way it rips through white flour. It has to work slowly, which means the glucose trickles out instead of flooding in. On top of that, you're getting real fiber and plant protein, both buffering the rise even further. The research on this is striking. A meta-analysis in the Nutrition Journal in 2025, pulling together 28 studies, found that chickpeas significantly lowered the spike in blood sugar after a meal. And a double-blind randomized trial showed something that matters directly here. When researchers replaced 30 to 60% of the wheat flour in a baked good with intact cell chickpea flour, the blood sugar response to that food dropped by around 40%. You're changing the flour, and the cookie answers back. A note on taste, because it's fair to ask. Chickpea flour has a mild, slightly earthy, almost savory character, so it shines in warm spiced recipes. Think cinnamon, think ginger, rather than something delicate, and two honest cautions. If beans aren't already a regular part of your diet, chickpea flour can leave you a little bloated at first, so start with a small amount and let your gut adjust. And read carefully. You want true chickpea flour as the base, not a cookie that simply borrows a hint of chickpea for marketing. With that, let's turn to the third. The third one carries a name you already trust: oats. But I have to be careful with it because trust is exactly where people get misled. Done right, an oat cookie is one of the best things on this list. Done the way most of them are made, it's one of the worst. Let me show you the difference. What makes oats special is a particular fiber called beta-glucan, and the evidence behind it is about as solid as nutrition science gets. A meta-analysis published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2021, drawing on 103 separate comparisons and rated high uncertainty, found that oat beta-glucan reduced the blood sugar spike after eating by around 23%. And it worked just as well in people with diabetes as in those without it. Here's how it does that. When beta-glucan meets the water in your gut, it forms a thick gel. Picture a slow, viscous net spread across your intestine, holding back the flow of sugar so it seeps through gradually instead of surging. That's the protection you're after. But, and this is where the commercial cookies fail you, beta-glucan only works when the oats are still intact. The thick, old-fashioned rolled kind, with very little sugar alongside. The moment a factory grinds those oats into fine flour and pours in sugar, that gel-forming power is gutted. So the oatmeal cookie off the shelf, built on white flour and sugar with a few oats for show, does not qualify. The version that protects you is the one you make at home. And before I give you the next one, which cookie do you miss most since your diagnosis? Type the name of the one you'd most want to bring back first. I'm curious what this audience has been quietly going without. A last honest note. Oatmeal cookie is one of the great health halos out there. The words sound virtuous, but most oat cookies on a store shelf are not the cookie I just described. With that clear, let's move to the fourth. The fourth one does something the others don't. It looks after your heart at the same time as your blood sugar, and at our age, that pairing is exactly what we want. I'm talking about ground flaxseed. Let me start with the long view, because it's reassuring. A meta-analysis in Complementary Therapies in Medicine in 2022, pulling together 13 randomized trials, found that flaxseed meaningfully lowered HbA1c in people with type 2 diabetes, and the effect was strongest in those whose blood sugar had been hardest to control, so the people with the most to gain gained the most. But there's a second piece of evidence that matters even more for a cookie, because a cookie is something you eat in a single sitting. A randomized crossover trial in Nutrients tested 15 grams of ground golden flaxseed taken before a meal. It cut the peak glucose by 17%, and the total rise over the following 2 hours by as much as 24%. That's a real difference from one small spoonful folded into what you're eating. And here's the part that earns flax its place on this list for people over 60. Flaxseed is rich in a plant-based omega-3 called ALA, along with compounds called lignans, both of which support your cardiovascular health. So you're calming the blood sugar and feeding the heart in the very same bite. 2 honest cautions though. It has to be ground flaxseed. Whole seeds pass straight through you without giving up any of their benefit. And in very large medicinal amounts, flax can have a mild blood-thinning effect. So if you're on anticoagulant medication, keep it to ordinary food quantities rather than heaping it in. As a flour partner, flax works beautifully folded into an almond or coconut base. Now let's get to the fifth, the one I promised would surprise you. So here's the fifth, and it's the one I get asked about most because every cookie so far has asked you to bake. This one doesn't. There is, in fact, a cookie you can buy right off the shelf that barely touches your blood sugar. And the key to finding it isn't the flour this time, it's the sweetener. Remember the 2 levers I gave you at the start? Up to now, every cookie has pulled the first one, fixing the flour. The 5th pulls the second. You're looking for a cookie built on a nut-based flour, almond or coconut, but sweetened with one ingredient in particular, allulose, or monk fruit. Let me take allulose first, because the evidence is genuinely interesting. A meta-analysis in Metabolism Open in 2024 found that allulose was essentially blood sugar neutral, and there was some signal it could modestly blunt the glucose rise after a meal in people with type 2 diabetes. So at worst, it stays out of the way, and at best, it may take a little of the edge off. Either way, it's doing you no harm where every ordinary sugar does. Monk fruit and stevia alongside it are dependably neutral. They don't raise your blood sugar, and you'll find them on shelves just about everywhere. Now you might be wondering, there's another sweetener that doesn't raise blood sugar either, one called erythritol, and it's in nearly every diabetic cookie on the market. So why am I not simply telling you to grab those? That's a fair question, and the answer is important enough that I've saved it for what comes next. Hold that thought. A few honest practicalities. Allulose is easy to find in the US and Canada, but it's restricted in the UK and much of Europe, so if you're watching from there, monk fruit or stevia is your reliable choice. When you read the label, you want the sweetener to say allulose, monk fruit, or stevia, and the base flour to be almond or oat, not white flour. And portion still matters even here, 2 or 3 cookies, not the box. With that, let me give you the warning I promised. This is the part I most need you to hear because these are the cookies that fool the very people trying hardest to do the right thing. Each one wears a healthy label. Each one fails for the same reasons we've been talking about all along. Wrong flour, wrong sweetener, or a halo of health that doesn't survive a closer look. Let me take them one at a time. The first trap is the wrong flour, and it hides behind a word you've been taught to trust: gluten-free. I need you to hear this plainly. Gluten-free does not mean diabetic-friendly. Those are 2 completely different things. Most gluten-free cookies are built on refined starches, and the numbers are sobering. Rice flour has a glycemic index of around 86, potato starch around 84, corn starch around 79. To put that in perspective, those often spike your blood sugar as hard as white flour or harder, so a cookie can be perfectly gluten-free and still hit you like a spoonful of sugar. The second trap is the wrong sweetener, and this one lives inside the cookies that market themselves straight to you, the ones stamped sugar-free or diabetic. The usual culprit is a sugar alcohol called maltitol. Here's the catch most people never learn. Maltitol still raises blood sugar. Its glycemic index runs from about 35 in powder form up to around 52 as a syrup, higher than most other sugar alcohols. And it brings a laxative effect on top of that, which is no small thing for an older gut. Now stay with me because there's a near twin you have to know about. Maltitol's cousin in spelling is maltodextrin, and they are not the same. Maltodextrin is a hidden filler tucked into a great many sugar-free products, and its glycemic index sits near 110. That is higher than table sugar itself. 2 ingredients, almost the same name, both quietly working against you. I think of Frank, 72, who came in genuinely frustrated. He'd been eating sugar-free cookies every evening for months, convinced he was being careful. He kept them in the cupboard as his reward after dinner, a little ritual he looked forward to. But his numbers wouldn't budge. When we read the package together, there it was, maltitol, with maltodextrin a few lines down. He hadn't done anything wrong, he'd simply trusted a label that hadn't earned it. And here's where I come back to that erythritol question I left you with. Erythritol and xylitol alongside it are sugar alcohols that don't raise your blood sugar, and on glucose alone they're fine. But newer evidence gives me pause specifically for people our age. A study in Nature Medicine in 2023 out of the Cleveland Clinic found that higher blood levels of erythritol were linked to a greater risk of serious cardiovascular events. And a 2024 study in arteriosclerosis, thrombosis, and vascular biology found that erythritol, not glucose, increased the reactivity of platelets, the cells involved in clotting. Xylitol, I'll add, also nudges blood sugar up slightly, which sets it apart from erythritol. Let me be measured here, because that's what this evidence deserves. Erythritol remains safe for your blood sugar, and what we have so far is observational and mechanistic. Not yet the hard outcome trials that prove cause and effect. So this isn't me declaring erythritol harmful. It's a note of caution for one specific group. If you have heart disease or take a blood thinner, that's reason enough to be thoughtful, not afraid. The third trap is the one that feels most innocent. Cookies sweetened naturally with honey, coconut sugar, or dates. I understand the appeal. But to your bloodstream, these are still sugar. That's the consensus among dietitians. Coconut sugar has a glycemic index around 50 to 54, essentially the same as table sugar. And honey sits near 50 as well. And while we're here, a low-fat cookie often spikes you faster, not slower, because the fat gets pulled out and more sugar or starch gets poured in to make up for it. Which brings us to what you can actually do about all this. So let me bring this all the way back to where we started. The trouble was never the cookie. It was never some failing on your part or some treat you simply had to mourn forever. The trouble was that no one ever told you about the two ingredients that decide everything: the flour and the sweetener. Get the flour right with almond, oat, chickpea, or ground flax, and choose a sweetener that doesn't fight you, like allulose, monk fruit, or stevia, and the picture changes completely. A diagnosis was never a sentence to give up cookies for the rest of your life. It was only ever a reason to become wiser about them. So here's exactly what to do with this. When you pick up any cookie, turn the package over and read 2 lines. The first ingredient should be almond flour, oats, chickpea flour, coconut, or ground flaxseed. The sweetener should be allulose, monk fruit, or stevia, and put it straight back on the shelf if you see rice flour, tapioca, or potato starch near the top, or maltitol or maltodextrin anywhere in the list. Then do something even more powerful. Test it on yourself. Pick 1 cookie, eat 2, and check your blood sugar 2 hours later. On another day, do the same with your old cookie. Now you're not trusting me or a label. You're reading the data from your own body, which is the only data that truly counts. And keep it to 2 or 3 cookies, not the whole box. One last thing, just for our age group. If you have heart disease or take a blood thinner, have a quick word with your doctor or pharmacist before you lean on anything sweetened with erythritol or xylitol. I'd love to hear from you now. Of these 5, which one will you try first? Or is there a cookie you gave up that you're finally going to bring back? Tell me in the comments. And if someone you love has a loved one living with type 2 diabetes who quietly gave up cookies out of fear, please send them this video. They deserve to know what you now know. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore, and I want to see you well, steady, and enjoying these years with a little more sweetness in them. The good kind. Everything I've shared today is here to educate you and help you ask better questions, never to replace the doctor who knows your history. And please hear me on this one. Never stop a medication, change a dose, or start a new supplement on your own without speaking to the doctor treating you first. Take good care of yourself. Subscribe so we can keep walking this road together, and I'll see you in the next video. How long has it been since you allowed yourself a piece of chocolate without feeling guilty about it? If you've been living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, I'd guess it's been years. And I want to tell you something that may genuinely shift how you look at this disease. The advice you were given, that chocolate is the enemy of your blood sugar, is not just outdated. In some cases, it has cost you a tool that could have helped you all along. There is a form of chocolate on your grocery store shelf with a glycemic index of just 22. That is less than 1/3 of white bread. It contains compounds documented in peer-reviewed clinical studies to improve insulin sensitivity, lower the inflammatory markers that keep diabetes burning forward, and even support the regeneration of the cells in your pancreas that actually produce insulin. The difference between this chocolate and the one harming you is sitting on every label, waiting 30 seconds for you to read it. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific types of chocolate that the evidence supports for people managing blood sugar. And pay close attention to number 5. It is the cheapest option of the 5, and it carries the strongest clinical evidence of all. Before I begin, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments how old you are and how long it's been since you turned down a piece of chocolate because you were afraid of your blood sugar. I read every comment, and your answers genuinely help me understand who's sitting with me today. Now, before I name a single one of those 5 types, I have to give you something that almost no article about chocolate and diabetes ever bothers to explain. Because if you don't understand this part, the 5 types I'm about to share will feel arbitrary, like a random list. Once you understand it, every single one will make complete biochemical sense. Here is the truth that most people miss. The benefit is not in chocolate. The benefit is in cacao. Those are 2 very different things. A mass-produced milk chocolate bar, packed with sugar, hydrogenated vegetable oil, and barely any real cacao, has almost nothing in common with the cacao bean itself, except a vague flavor. The healing compounds live in the cacao. The industrial bar simply borrows its name. Cacao contains a concentrated group of plant compounds called flavonoids, and the 2 that matter most for your blood sugar are catechin and epicatechin. These have 3 mechanisms that work directly on the disease you and I are trying to manage. The first is improving insulin sensitivity by repairing the lining of your blood vessels. I want you to picture insulin resistance like a phone line full of static. Insulin is calling. Glucose is waiting at your cells, ready to come inside. But the cell can't hear the signal clearly anymore. Cacao flavonoids work on that lining, the endothelium, and they help clear the static so your cells can finally receive the message. The second is reducing oxidative stress. Cacao sits among the highest-ranking foods ever measured for antioxidant capacity, and oxidative stress is not some abstract concept. It is one of the central reasons your insulin receptors stop functioning properly. Bring oxidative stress down, and those receptors start working again. The third mechanism is the one that genuinely changed how I think about this food. Epicatechin, the most abundant flavonoid in cacao, has been shown in cellular studies to stimulate insulin secretion and support the regeneration of the beta cells in your pancreas. Those are the cells that actually produce insulin. And in type 2 diabetes, they slowly get worn down and destroyed. The idea that a food compound could help bring those cells back rather than just compensate for losing them is a different conversation entirely. So when I rank these next 5 types, I'm not picking favorites. I'm ranking them by how much flavonoid they deliver and how strong the clinical evidence sits behind each one. Let me start with the easiest one to bring into your kitchen tonight. Number 1 is dark chocolate with at least 70% cacao. I put this first not because it's the most powerful, but because it's the most realistic place for most of my patients to begin. The flavor is firm, but still enjoyable. You can find it in any grocery store in America, Britain, or Canada. And the science behind it is solid enough that I have no hesitation putting it in your kitchen tonight. Let me give you the numbers. 70% dark chocolate has a glycemic index of around 22. To put that in perspective, table sugar sits at 65. White bread is around 71. So a square of good dark chocolate produces a slow, gentle rise in blood sugar, not the sharp spike most people assume. The reason is simple. At 70% cacao, there is far less sugar in the bar, and what remains is balanced by cacao fat and cacao fiber. Both slow down digestion. The fiber delays how quickly your stomach empties. The fat slows how fast any sugar present reaches the absorptive surface of your small intestine. Your body just doesn't see a sudden flood of glucose. Let me tell you about Margaret. She came to my office at 64 with a fresh pre-diabetes diagnosis and an A1C of 6.1. She lived alone, and for years she'd been eating 3 or 4 pieces of milk chocolate every night after dinner. She called it her reward, and she felt guilty about every single piece. I didn't tell her to stop. I told her to switch. 2 squares of 70% dark chocolate, eaten after a dinner with protein and fiber. 3 months later, her A1C was 5.7. But the part that mattered most to her was different. She told me she'd stopped hiding chocolate in her kitchen drawer. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has found that regular cacao consumption is linked to reduced cardiovascular risk. That matters enormously for you because diabetes already doubles or quadruples your risk of heart disease. A clinically supported portion is about 20 to 30 grams per day, which is 2 or 3 small squares. Now, here is the label trap. Many bars sold as dark chocolate or 70% cacao actually list sugar as the first ingredient on the back. The front of the package is marketing. The ingredient list is the truth. Flip the bar over. Cacao mass or cacao paste must be the first word on that list. If sugar comes first, the bar is not what the front claims, no matter how dark it looks. Number 2 is dark chocolate with 85% cacao or higher. And I want to be careful here, because at first glance, this looks like just a stronger version of number 1. It is not. The clinical evidence behind 85% and above is a different conversation entirely. Here's why. As cacao percentage climbs, 2 things happen at the same time. The flavonoid concentration rises substantially, and the sugar content drops from around 20 to 25 grams per 100 grams down to roughly 10 to 14. You are getting more of the medicine and less of the problem in the very same bite. Now let me show you the study I want every diabetic patient to know about. A clinical trial looked at chocolate with 83% cacao in 60 non-smoking patients with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, ages 35 to 70. Each person consumed 25 grams a day, containing 450 milligrams of flavonoids, for 8 weeks. The results were striking. Their lipid profiles improved. And 3 of the most important inflammatory markers in diabetes, CRP, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha, dropped significantly. I want you to understand why this matters. These 3 markers are not just numbers on a report. They are the 3 lieutenants of chronic low-grade inflammation, and chronic inflammation is the silent fire that keeps insulin resistance burning year after year. When you lower CRP, you are turning down the heat on that fire. You are addressing the cause of the disease, not just chasing the symptom. There's more. 2 large Swedish studies found that increasing dark chocolate consumption to at least 50 grams per week reduced stroke risk, both ischemic and hemorrhagic, by up to 27%. For someone over 60 with diabetes, whose stroke risk is already much higher than the general population, that is not a minor footnote. That is direct protection of the brain. Now, before I go on, let me ask you something personally. What was your most recent A1C number? And has any doctor ever sat you down and really explained how chronic inflammation drives your diabetes forward year after year? Tell me in the comments. I read every answer, and it helps me decide what to cover next on this channel. A practical portion of 85% chocolate is 20 to 25 grams per day. And one of the quiet advantages of going to this percentage is that the flavor is so much more intense and so much less sweet, you naturally stop after 1 or 2 squares. Your taste buds get satisfied before the bar gets eaten. I've seen patients who could never moderate milk chocolate suddenly find moderation effortless with 85%. The bar simply asks you to slow down. That is not a small thing for someone who has spent decades fighting their own sweet tooth, and it makes consistency far easier. Number 3 takes us to the outer edge of the chocolate world. 100% cacao and cacao nibs. No added sugar, no added milk. No added fat beyond what already lives inside the cacao bean itself. This is cacao stripped down to its truest form, and from a glycemic standpoint, it is as safe as solid chocolate ever gets. Cacao nibs deserve their own mention. These are simply pieces of roasted cacao bean, crushed but not refined. Because they skip the pressing and conching steps that other chocolate goes through, they hold on to more flavonoids and more fiber than any processed bar. They are crunchy, deeply bitter, and they look almost nothing like the chocolate you grew up with. Now let me be honest with you the way I would in my office. Most of my patients cannot sit down and eat 100% chocolate as a treat. The bitterness is too sharp for a palate that has known sweetness for 60 or 70 years, and I have no interest in pretending otherwise. So I do not recommend it as a snack. I recommend it as an ingredient. That is where it becomes powerful and pleasant at the same time. A teaspoon of cacao nibs sprinkled across plain Greek yogurt. 10 grams of 100% chocolate melted and stirred into a spoonful of almond butter. A small handful of nibs folded into your morning oatmeal. These are simple shifts, but they deliver real flavonoid content without changing your blood sugar curve in any meaningful way. Let me tell you about Robert. He came to me at 71, 12 years into type 2 diabetes, sitting at an A1C of 7.3 on metformin. He'd loved chocolate his whole life and had given it up completely for 5 years. His numbers never improved. We talked about cacao nibs, and he started sprinkling a teaspoon over his breakfast oatmeal. 4 months later, he looked at me across the desk and said something I still remember word for word. "I can't believe something this good is actually helping me." His A1C had dropped to 6.8. Number 4 is sugar-free chocolate, but only the kind sweetened with erythritol or stevia. And I'm going to be very direct in this section because this is where the food industry plays its most dishonest game with diabetic shoppers. First, the science of what actually works. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol with a glycemic index of essentially 0. It carries about 70% of the sweetness of regular sugar, but your body absorbs it through a different pathway and excretes most of it through the kidneys without significantly raising blood glucose or stimulating insulin. Stevia, which comes from the leaves of a plant, takes a different route to the same destination. The steviol glycosides are not metabolized by your body at all, and they produce no measurable glucose response. So a chocolate bar sweetened with erythritol or stevia gives you a flavor surprisingly close to the milk chocolate you remember, with almost none of the metabolic cost. But here is where you have to be careful. Many bars marketed as sugar-free in the United States, Canada, and the UK do not use erythritol or stevia at all. They use maltitol. And maltitol has a glycemic index of 52. That is not low. That is genuinely capable of raising your blood sugar, particularly if you eat more than 1 or 2 squares. On top of that, maltitol in older bodies often causes uncomfortable bloating, gas, and even sudden diarrhea because it draws water into the intestine. I have had more than one patient call me in distress after a maltitol-sweetened diabetic chocolate sent them running to the bathroom an hour after dinner. So here's your 30-second rule for this category. Pick up the bar, flip it over. Look at the sweetener line in the ingredient list. You want to see the word erythritol or steviol glycosides clearly named. If you see maltitol, isomalt, or a vague phrase like sugar alcohols, without specifying which one, put the bar back on the shelf. I want to underline this because this is where the marketing on the front of the package is most disconnected from the reality on the back. A label that says diabetic friendly in large letters can be hiding an ingredient that does the exact opposite of what that promise suggests. Trust the back, never the front. And now we come to number 5, the one I told you to pay close attention to at the start of this video, pure unsweetened cacao powder. It is the cheapest thing on the shelf. You can buy a large container of it for the price of a single fancy chocolate bar. And it is the form of cacao with the strongest clinical evidence behind it by a meaningful margin. I want to walk you carefully through the study that changed how I prescribe cacao to my own patients. A systematic review conducted by researchers at the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Brazil, published in 2021, analyzed 7 clinical studies examining the effects of cacao flavonoids on blood glucose and serum insulin in people living with type 2 diabetes. The consolidated finding was this. Dark chocolate or cacao powder at a dose of 25 to 30 grams per day showed beneficial effects on blood glucose and on hemoglobin A1C, along with cardiovascular protection through improved HDL cholesterol. I need you to understand what that A1C finding actually means. A1C is the gold standard. It is the marker your doctor uses to evaluate how well you've controlled your blood sugar over the past 3 months. It is not a snapshot, it is a season. And when a dietary intervention moves that number, you are looking at a real, durable change in how your body is handling glucose. Not a fleeting effect, a structural one. So why does plain cacao powder outperform even the best dark chocolate bar? Because manufacturing a chocolate bar requires pressing, conching, and tempering, and every one of those steps degrades a portion of the flavonoid content. Pure natural cacao powder, the kind that has not been alkalized or Dutch processed, skips most of that loss. Think of a regular chocolate bar like tea brewed from a bag that has already been steeped twice. There is still flavor left, but the active compounds have faded. Pure cacao powder is the whole leaf. In practice, this is the easiest of the 5 to integrate into your daily life. A tablespoon stirred into black coffee, a spoonful blended into plain full-fat yogurt, a teaspoon warmed gently with unsweetened almond milk on the stove, a small amount folded into your morning oatmeal. Every one of those choices delivers more flavonoids than a square of dark chocolate, with essentially no impact on your blood sugar curve. Let me tell you about Carolyn. She came to me at 68, 5 years into type 2 diabetes, with an A1C that had been parked at exactly 7.0 for 2 stubborn years. She was taking her medication faithfully and walking every day. She told me, almost in tears, "I have tried everything. I changed one thing, just one." The sugar and creamer in her morning coffee became 1 tablespoon of pure cacao powder, a few drops of stevia, and unsweetened almond milk. 6 months later, her A1C was 6.5. This is not magic. This is biochemistry, working quietly every morning, in a single cup of coffee. The label trap here is the simplest of all. The ingredient list should contain exactly one item: cocoa powder or cacao powder. Nothing else. Avoid hot chocolate mixes, drinking chocolate blends, and any flavored cocoa product, no matter what it claims on the front. Even the ones labeled reduced sugar or diet will quietly contain added sweeteners, modified starches, or oils that destroy the entire metabolic profile you just learned about. Before I close this out, I want to address something that almost never gets discussed in a clinical conversation about food and diabetes, and I think it might be the most important thing I say today. Have you ever forbidden yourself a food completely, only to find yourself eating twice as much of it on a Saturday night, and then spending the next week silently punishing yourself for it? If you nodded just now, please understand, you are not weak. You are human. And your body is responding exactly the way the research predicts. Studies in nutritional psychology have shown something that surprised me when I first read it. People who feel guilty after eating tend to eat more in the hours that follow, not less. The guilt triggers a cycle of restriction, craving, and rebound, and that cycle produces worse blood sugar control over time than a calm, planned, portion-controlled inclusion of the food you actually want. Picture 2 patients in my clinic eating the exact same 2 squares of 85% dark chocolate after dinner. One of them knows the glycemic index is 22. She understands the flavonoids are quietly improving her insulin sensitivity. She enjoys the chocolate, finishes it, and moves on with her evening. The other believes she is destroying her health with every bite. Her cortisol rises. Her guilt rises. And by 10 o'clock, she has eaten 3 more squares she never planned to touch. Same chocolate, same body, completely different outcomes. The knowledge changed the experience, and the experience changed the behavior. This is what sustainable diabetes management actually looks like in real life, over years and decades. Not perfect restriction, not iron willpower. Plan the inclusion, control the portion, choose the right type. Those three things, repeated quietly, beat a lifetime of guilt every single time. So let me bring all of this back to where we started. Chocolate is not forbidden to you because you have diabetes or prediabetes. The wrong chocolate is. And the difference between the two is sitting on the back of every package, waiting 30 seconds for you to read it. You now know the 5 forms that the science actually supports. 70% dark chocolate, your easiest doorway in, with a glycemic index of just 22. 85%, where the clinical evidence shifts to reducing the inflammatory markers that keep your diabetes burning. 100% and cacao nibs, the zero sugar tier, best used as an ingredient woven into yogurt or oatmeal. Sugar-free chocolate sweetened with erythritol or stevia, never maltitol. And finally, pure unsweetened cacao powder, the cheapest option and the one with the strongest A1C evidence of all. Here is what I want you to do, starting tonight. Open your pantry, pull out every chocolate product you currently own, flip each one over, and read the very first word in the ingredient list. If that word is sugar, set it aside. If the word is cacao mass or cocoa mass, you can keep it. This week, pick up a container of pure, unsweetened cacao powder. Make sure that ingredient list has exactly one item. Start with 1 tablespoon in your morning coffee or oatmeal, and check your blood sugar 2 hours after breakfast for the first few days. Your body's response is the only response that truly matters. And at your next visit, ask your doctor a simple, kind question. Given my current A1C, could pure cacao have a place in my nutrition plan? That is a conversation worth having. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 5 types, which one surprised you the most? And which one are you going to try first this week? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers shape what I cover next. And if you know someone who has been living under the weight of chocolate guilt for years, send them this video. They deserve to know the truth. And one quiet change in their kitchen could move the needle on their next A1C. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. 20 years of sitting with patients across the same desk has taught me one thing more than any other. The right knowledge brings relief. The wrong knowledge breeds fear. I want you to walk away from this video feeling lighter, not guiltier. Everything I shared today is for your education, grounded in real clinical evidence, but it does not replace the conversation you have with a doctor who knows your history and your numbers. And please, never adjust or stop your diabetes medication, whether it is metformin, insulin, or anything else, based on something you watched online, including this video. Any change to your prescriptions must go through the physician treating you. I hope this week brings you steadier blood sugar and a gentler relationship with the food on your plate. If today helped, subscribe so I can keep showing up for you each week with information you can actually trust. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one. There's a cracker sitting in millions of kitchens right now that scores an 85 on the glycemic index. In plain terms, that's higher than many candies, and dangerously close to eating spoonfuls of pure glucose. And the cruel irony? It's the cracker most people over 60 choose precisely because they believe it's the light, healthy option. If you're managing blood sugar, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, the cracker aisle can feel like a trap. One box says whole grain, another sugar-free, a third gluten-free, and yet your numbers still creep up after that afternoon snack. Those words on the front of the box were never meant to protect your blood sugar. They were meant to sell. Today I'm giving you the 5 best crackers for blood sugar and type 2 diabetes by exact brand name, the ones I'd feel good seeing in your pantry, and the 3 worst that quietly work against you. We'll count the good ones together, 1 through 5, and the 5th may surprise you most. And that cracker scoring an 85? You'll find out exactly which one it is before we're done. Stay with me to the end. Before we get into it, do me a quick favor. Tell me in the comments which cracker you keep in your kitchen right now, the one you reach for in the afternoon. Just the name is enough. I'm asking because you might be surprised whether it lands on today's good list or the one to avoid. And if you'd like more trustworthy, no-nonsense guidance on keeping your blood sugar steady after 60, subscribe and stay close. That's what I'm here for. So, let me clear something up that confuses almost everyone. The problem was never the cracker itself. It's what the cracker is made of, the flour and the fiber. That's why two crackers that look identical, sitting side by side on the same shelf, can do completely opposite things inside your body. Here's what happens. When a cracker is built from refined flour, your gut breaks it down into simple sugar within minutes. There's no fiber, no protein to slow things down, no speed bump on the road. So the sugar floods in fast, your blood sugar spikes, and then it crashes just as hard. That crash is what leaves you tired an hour later, reaching for another snack you didn't plan on eating. Now, this isn't just my opinion. A clinical trial, registered under the identifier NCT 05702-372, tested crackers that all contained the same 50 grams of carbohydrate, same carb load, different flour. The cracker made from sunflower seed flour scored a glycemic index of 53. Whole wheat came in at 77. And the one made from refined flour, it hit 90 dwarfs, nearly double the impact of the seed cracker from foods that looked almost the same on the plate. Let me tell you about Margaret. She's 68, and she is careful, genuinely careful, about what she eats. But her morning numbers wouldn't budge. Month after month, the same stubborn reading. She kept a snack in her pantry she trusted more than anything else, something she was certain was the lightest, healthiest choice in the house. Her granddaughter had once told her it was the diet kind, and that was good enough for Margaret. I'll tell you exactly what it was later, but I think a few of you already keep the same box. So, before we get to the brands, I want to hand you a tool. Call it your label filter. 4 things to check every single time you turn a box over. First, the very first ingredient should be a seed or a whole grain. Not enriched flour, not wheat flour. Those are the refined kind dressed up in friendly words. Second, at least 3 grams of fiber per serving. Third, 0 added sugar. And fourth, this one matters especially after 60 mounds low sodium because your heart and your kidneys are carrying enough already. Keep those 4 in your back pocket, because once you can read a box this way, you stop trusting the front of the package and start trusting the truth on the back. And that's where we're headed. 5 crackers that pass this test, starting with the easiest one to find. Let's start with number 1, and I picked this one first on purpose because it's the easiest swap you can make. You can find it in nearly every grocery store across the country, sitting right there on the regular shelf. No specialty aisle, no health food store. It's Triscuit Original. Turn the box over and read that ingredient list because it's refreshingly short. Whole grain wheat, oil, and sea salt. That's it. 3 ingredients. You get 3 grams of fiber and only about half a gram of sugar per serving, and its glycemic index lands in the moderate range, somewhere around 50 to 55. Compare that to the refined cracker that hit 90, and you can already see the difference that first ingredient makes. And here's why that first ingredient matters so much. When 100% whole grain leads the list, the fiber is still intact, and fiber is what slows the whole digestion process down, so the sugar trickles in instead of flooding. This isn't a small effect either. One large analysis pooling data from over 463,000 people found that the highest whole grain intake was tied to a 21% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. For every 50 grams a day, the risk dropped by 23%. That's the quiet power of choosing the whole grain version. One practical word on the shelf, though. Reach for the original or the hint of salt version. The flavored ones, the ones coated in seasonings, often carry more sugar and more sodium than you'd expect. And don't be fooled by the thin crisps sitting next to them. Despite the name, they don't share the same clean profile. Stick with the plain box. It's doing more for you than the fancier ones beside it. Now for number 2, and this one steps things up. If you're dealing with prediabetes or type 2, this is the group with the strongest evidence behind it. Because it doesn't just keep your blood sugar low, it actually asks less of your pancreas. I'm talking about whole grain rye crisp bread, and the brand to look for is Wasa. Reach for the whole grain, fiber, or light rye versions. You'll get around 3 grams of fiber, about half a gram of sugar, and notably low sodium. Somewhere near 85 milligrams a serving, which matters more than ever after 60. And Wasa isn't your only option here. Revita and Sigdal sit in the same family, same kind of dense, honest rye crisp bread, same benefits. Here's what makes rye special. Research out of Lund University in Sweden found that whole grain rye crisp bread left people feeling fuller and produced a lower insulin response after eating than crackers made from refined wheat. And whole rye kernels themselves? A glycemic index of just 48. So what does that actually mean for you day to day? 2 things. Feeling fuller longer means you're far less likely to drift back to the pantry for that afternoon nibble. And a lower insulin response means fewer of those blood sugar roller coasters. The steep climbs and stomach-dropping falls that leave you foggy and drained. One last tip. Rye crisp bread is firm, almost sturdy. That's not a flaw. It makes it the perfect base to build on, which is exactly what we'll get into a little later. For now, just know that this is one of the most pancreas-friendly choices you can put in your cart. Quick question for you before we go on, and be honest with me here. When you eat your crackers, how do you actually eat them? Do you nibble them plain, straight out of the box, or do you pair them with something? Drop it in the comments, because how you eat them turns out to matter just as much as which ones you choose, and I'll show you exactly why a little later. On to number 3. This one's for anyone who's sensitive to gluten, or who simply wants a break from wheat, and it comes backed by the very trial I mentioned at the start. The brand is Crunchmaster, in the multi-seed or multi-grain variety. What you're getting here is a blend of grains and seeds rather than refined flour, and it's gluten-free. Its glycemic index lands in that comfortable range, roughly 45 to 55. And remember that clinical trial, the one where flour was the only thing that changed? That sunflower seed flour, the one that scored a 53 against refined flour's 90, is exactly this kind of seed-based cracker. It's living proof of the principle we keep coming back to: change the flour, and you change what happens to your blood sugar. The seeds aren't just texture, they're the whole reason the glucose curve flattens out. A couple of practical notes when you're standing in the aisle. Read the label and choose the lower sodium version, because some batches carry more salt than others. And steer clear of the coated flavors, the ranch, the cheese-dusted ones, which tend to come loaded with extra additives you don't need. Who is this really for? If you're over 60 and gluten bothers your stomach, or you're just tired of wheat and want something with a little more variety, this is your cracker. It gives you that satisfying crunch without the refined flour spike, and that's the trade you're always trying to make. So that's 3 down, and we're climbing toward the ones that do the most for your numbers. Number 4 takes us somewhere a little different, into lower carb territory, with a benefit your heart will thank you for. Number 4 is where we drop into genuinely lower carb territory. And this matters especially if, like so many people after 60, you're watching your heart as closely as your blood sugar. The brand is Simple Mills almond flour crackers. These are built from a blend of almond flour, sunflower seeds, and flax, and that combination does double duty. Almonds bring vitamin E and the kind of monounsaturated fat that's good for your heart, while the flax adds a dose of omega-3. So you're not just dodging a sugar spike, you're feeding your cardiovascular system at the same time. But let me be straight with you about the numbers, because I won't oversell this one. A 30-gram serving runs about 150 calories with 18 grams of carbohydrate, 8 grams of fat, and 3 grams of protein. So no ways, this is not a super low-carb cracker. You still need to mind your portion. What works in your favor is that the fat and the protein blunt the impact, so the blood sugar response stays gentle even with those carbs in there. It's about the whole package, not just one number. And here's the trap I want you to sidestep with this one. These are gluten-free, and gluten-free has somehow become a health halo. People see those words and assume it's automatically better for them. It isn't. Gluten-free can still be refined starch dressed up nicely. The reason Simple Mills earns a spot on this list has nothing to do with that label. It earns it because it's built from nuts and seeds. The flour is the hero here, not the marketing on the front of the box. And now we reach number 5, the one I promised might surprise you most. Because when most people picture the best cracker for blood sugar, this is not what comes to mind. But pound for pound, it's the strongest performer on this entire list. I'm talking about flaxseed crackers. Flackers is the brand, with Mary's Gone crackers as the easier to find runner-up. Here's why Flackers earn the crown. A serving size about 8 crackers gives you roughly 10 grams of carbohydrate. But look closer. 9 of those grams are fiber, and you're getting 6 grams of protein on top. Subtract the fiber, and the carbohydrate that actually moves your blood sugar is almost nothing. That's about as friendly a number as a cracker can give you. And if Flackers are hard to find near you, Mary's Gone crackers, made from brown rice, quinoa, flax, and sesame, with 3 grams of fiber, organic, and gluten-free, is the one you'll spot on more shelves. Let me put that fiber in perspective because it's remarkable. 1 serving of Flackers delivers more than 1/3 of your entire fiber needs for the day. And fiber isn't a minor detail for people in your situation. A study published in PLOS Medicine found that among people with diabetes, raising fiber intake from 19 grams a day up to 35 was linked to 14 fewer deaths per 1,000 people. That's the kind of number that should make you look twice. The mechanism behind all this comes down to a ratio, protein to carbohydrate. The sweet spot is roughly 1 gram of protein for every 2 grams of carb or less, and these crackers hit it. That ratio is why the sugar climbs slowly, why you stay full, why things hold steady. One honest everyday word of caution though. Flaxseed is rich in oil, and oil goes rancid. So once you open the box, keep it in the refrigerator. A small thing, but it's the difference between a cracker that helps you and one that's quietly gone off in the cupboard. Now here's something I need you to hear, because it changes everything. Even the best cracker on that list, even the Flackers, even the rye, can spike your blood sugar if you eat it the wrong way. The cracker is only half the equation. How you eat it is the other half. And there are 3 levers in your control: what you pair it with, how much you eat, and when you eat it. Let's start with the golden rule, the one I want you to tattoo on your memory. Never eat a naked carb. Never eat crackers alone. Always pair them with protein or a healthy fat. A slice of cheese, a spoon of unsweetened nut butter, hummus, a little mashed avocado. That partner slows your digestion down and shaves the top right off the sugar peak. The same cracker, eaten with cheese instead of bare, lands in your bloodstream like a completely different food. Then there's portion. And this is where good intentions quietly fall apart. Most people eat 2, sometimes 3 servings while genuinely believing they've had one. And every time you double the portion, you double the carbs, the sodium, the calories. So don't eat by the handful. Look at the box, find the serving size, and count the actual crackers. It feels almost silly, but it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Timing matters too. Your body is usually more sensitive to insulin in the morning and less so at night, which means a high glycemic cracker eaten late in the evening spikes you harder than the same cracker at breakfast. So if you do snack after dark, that's exactly when pairing with protein becomes non-negotiable. And there's one more thing that matters enormously after 60 hours: sodium. The FDA's standard for low sodium is under 140 milligrams per serving. The American Heart Association recommends staying under 2,300 milligrams a day, and ideally under 1,500 if you've got high blood pressure. If you're older with blood pressure or kidney concerns, you're in the high-risk group, which means a cracker that's wonderful for your sugar, but loaded with salt is still working against you. So let me hand you back that label filter, because it cuts through all 4 of the big marketing traps. Whole grain on the front, while white flour leads the ingredients. Sugar-free, that still turns to sugar because it's white flour. Gluten-free, that's just refined starch. Lightly sweetened. which is still added sugar wearing a softer name. Read the back. Always the back. So, we've covered what to put in your cart. Now let me show you what to leave on the shelf. The 3 crackers quietly working against you. And I'm counting these down from bad to worst, because the worst one is the very cracker so many people believe is the healthiest thing in their kitchen. Coming in at number 3, Ritz and the buttery snack crackers like them. Flip one over and the first ingredient is enriched refined flour, followed by sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and palm oil. Fiber? Almost none. Under a gram. Its glycemic index sits around 70, which means your body handles it about the same as it would handle sugar. And watch for the trap on some boxes that say, baked with whole wheat. Read carefully. The refined flour still comes first on the list. The whole wheat is only second, riding along for the marketing. Number 2, the saltine, the plain soda cracker, white refined flour, a glycemic index around 72, and virtually no fiber to slow any of it down. One serving hits your blood sugar about the same as 2 slices of white bread. I'll give you a quick honorable mention here too. Wheat Thins. They wear the whole grain label proudly, but they also carry refined canola oil and several forms of added sugar, around 4 grams of added sugar per serving. Not the friend the box pretends to be. And now, the worst of them all, number 1. Rice crackers and rice cakes. This is the cracker from the very start of our time together, the one scoring an 85 on the glycemic index. Its glycemic load runs around 65 per 100 grams. The fiber is minimal, and the sodium is often high. Large population studies have linked white rice to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. And here's the cruel paradox. People choose it precisely because it looks so light, so airy, so harmless. That lightness is exactly the problem. There's nothing in it to slow the sugar down. And that brings us back to Margaret. This was her snack. The one her granddaughter called the diet kind. The box she trusted more than anything else in her pantry was a stack of rice cakes, and every afternoon it was quietly undoing all her careful work everywhere else. When she finally swapped it for seed and rye crackers, started pairing them with a little protein, and watched her portions, her morning numbers began to move. Not overnight, not some miracle reversal, but after months of being stuck, that stubborn reading finally started inching in the right direction for the first time. Because she'd found the one thing that had been hiding in plain sight. So, let's bring this home. I want you to walk away with one idea fixed in your mind. The cracker was never your enemy. It never was. What decides whether that snack helps you or harms you isn't the shape or the brand on the front. It's the flour it's built from and the fiber it carries. That's the whole secret. And Margaret's story shows you how much a small change on a grocery shelf can really mean. One swap, one careful look at the back of a box, and months of being stuck finally gave way. You can see the trap now, and once you can see it, you're no longer caught in it. So, here's exactly where to start. 5 simple things, and you can begin this week. First, turn the box over and read that very first ingredient. It has to be a seed or a whole grain, not enriched flour wearing a friendly name. Second, look for at least 3 grams of fiber and 0 added sugar. And while you're there, check that sodium sits under 140 milligrams a serving. Third, on your next trip to the store, replace what you're using now with one of the 5 brands we covered, and if you want the easiest place to begin, reach for Triscuit or Wassa. Fourth, never eat a cracker naked, always pair it with protein or a healthy fat. And fifth, count your crackers by the serving on the label instead of eating by the handful, and if you tend to snack late, lean on the seed-based ones and pair them with protein. One more thing worth doing. At your next visit, ask your doctor a simple, friendly question. Given my current numbers, how many carbs should I aim for in a snack? It's a good conversation to have together. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Of those 5 good crackers we went through today, Which one are you going to try first on your next shopping trip? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious which one calls to you. And if someone you love is over 60, managing their blood sugar, and still has a stack of rice crackers or saltines sitting in their kitchen, send them this video. It might be the small nudge that helps them see what Margaret finally saw. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want you to remember that everything we talked about today is here to help you understand your own body and make informed choices. It's not a replacement for the doctor who knows your history. And please, never stop or change a medication on your own without talking to the doctor treating you first. That part matters deeply. Take good care of yourself, keep reading those labels, and if this helped you, subscribe and stay with me. I'll see you